Hey, not ready for primetime players. Anthony Zizzle here, broadcasting to you from a state-of-the-art studio, totally not a warehouse in Brooklyn. Now, let's talk about Saturday Night Live, because they just recently celebrated their 50th anniversary broadcasting on television, and I think that is quite an amazing accomplishment. What started off as a ragtag counterculture show, it eventually became not only a New York institution, but the granddaddy of all sketch comedy, really. SNL sketch comedy, like, they're basically synonymous at this point. Um, the word iconic, it gets thrown around a lot these days, but in this case, it absolutely applies. The show's an even bigger staple in New York than a bum exposing himself to a taxi cab full of girls on their way to a bachelorette party. So, if you were a fan like I am, and you're walking around New York City around the time that this is happening, it was impossible not to get swept up in the celebration and the excitement of it all. Uh, but unfortunately, even though that did happen, I also was a little bit sad when it happened. The anniversary made me sad, and that's what this video is about today. But in order to do that, I do have to start off with a hacky little joke I once heard, so here it goes. How do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. When I was a kid, I went through a phase where I was obsessed with trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, because that's a question that adults ask you constantly, which is kind of weird because it's just like you don't have your full personality formed yet, nor do you have an understanding of the world, so it's like, how are you gonna answer that question? When I grow up, I want to be a doctor and have the emotional weight of my patient's death take a toll on me. One of the earliest dreams I remember having was that I wanted to make video games. Whatever I thought of, have that game in my head, appear on the screen, have kids around the world play it, seemed like a decent dream. I remember telling my mother that probably I was younger than 10, and she came back at me with, well, if you want to do that, you really have to be good at math. And since my family hails from Italy and not Korea, that was the end of that dream. My mother wasn't trying to discourage me, quite the opposite, in fact. She was probably trying to inspire me, try to make me better at math so I can achieve my dream, but that's not how my brain works. My brain heard, like, Mary, you can't do that. You think you're gonna catch all 150 Pokemon? Mary, you're kidding yourself. It was discouraging, so that was the end of that dream. Up until I was about the age of 13, just about every TV show I watched was on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, and then around that age I started veering off into more adult programming, and I happened upon a little show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? And at the time, at least for me, there was nothing else like it. You had Ryan Stiles, Wayne Brady, Colin Mockery, and they were all just doing their thing together, and they had no script. They were all just making it up on the spot, and they were just coming together, making something together, and it was clever and hilarious, and I love that. There was also a British version of that show, and the thing about it is, it actually had, those same guys, most of them at least, and, but even though they had the same guys, you would think that it would be, like, equally funny, but I just never gelled with the British version of the show, and that didn't make sense to me, and I was thinking about it, and I arrived at the conclusion that, British improv reflects British society, and American improv reflects American society, um, because the British improv, it seems to me very by the rules, like just, oh, hello, we're here, we're about to use improvisation for you. Yes, we're here to follow the rules and we'll churn out a spectacular show for you. Yes, hurrah, crumpets and whatnot. And American improv is just more off the rails. Like, British improv is like improvisers doing improv together, whereas the American improv and the American Whose Line Is It Anyway show was more friends improvising with each other. And that's, I guess, what I loved about it. Like, American improv is you calling your friend a douche and then waiting for him to come back at you with something like, well, if I'm a douche, that just means I say vagina quite frequently. And Drew Carey, he was just like an excellent host, like the perfect host for that show, because he just encouraged it all. He just had everybody roasting each other, and that was just like the best part of it, I feel. And he didn't even have an improv background as the thing. Like, he was from the world of stand-up, but he fit in with the improvisers just very well. And so, I really wanted to be part of that show. Like, I didn't really have that kind of positivity in my life. Like, it seemed like I was getting all those insults towards me, but it's just like they were insulting each other and they were all happy together. And I think that's what sparked something in me to want to be on that show and to be a comedian. So yeah, I really wanted to be on that show, but I was just this shy kid and I didn't have any friends. I felt like nobody liked me, so I was just like, well, nobody likes you and you're kind of afraid to be in front of everybody, so just like, how are you going to be on that show? But watching Drew on Whose Line, it led me to watching his other show, his sitcom, The Drew Carey Show. Now, at the risk of sounding unpopular, I'm going to tell you that I hate the attitude representation matters. Because, this seems very obvious to me, don't know why it isn't to other people, but everybody's supposed to be equal, and you're supposed to treat everybody else equally. You're not supposed to care about stupid things like someone's skin color or what's between their legs. And you're supposed to like and respect all people, not all people, but people of all backgrounds. I mean, if their actions are just shitty, then shitty, you know what I'm saying. And I don't like this attitude because, like, do you think I don't look up to people of other backgrounds? Like, I wasn't inspired by people like Dave Chappelle and Tina Fey and Patrice O'Neal and even Jackie Chan. He's not really a straight comedian, but he does have a comedic persona in his movies that he builds them around, and I think that's something to try to emulate too. So I don't get this. I mean, I get it, but like, I don't think that's what we should be focusing on. I will, however, concede that the reason I don't like it is because you're supposed to be a full-grown adult, like, and you're supposed to, watch people of all backgrounds and enjoy them. I will concede that if you are a child, it could be good for them, have little black kids and white kids eating cookies together on TV. That's good. Because kids, they think in terms of like, oh, that person's just like me. They're just like me. So it's just, for them, I can see why you would want to be more representative. But for adults, I don't like it. Anyway, as a kid, maybe it was a good thing for me to see the Drew Carey Show because, I saw Drew and he was kind of a, unpopular guy. Felt like he wasn't really just respected by the outside world. And, that spoke to me. There wasn't really anything else that spoke to me before then. Maybe there were probably like one or two characters and they were just animated cartoons or from video games. But Drew was a living, breathing person and he felt like he was like me. So it kind of made me feel like, oh, well, I guess I can do that. And, if other kids need that, I guess we should try to give that to them too. By the time I was 14, Comedy Central began airing syndicated reruns of 90s Saturday Night Live all the time. And from then on, I was hooked. I was in love. Just after school all the time, I was just racing home because I was like, oh, it's on. Very excited. You had Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Dana Carvey, Chris Kattan, just about everybody I loved and respected, and I really wanted to be in their company. It was my dream. So, from then on, it was just cemented. I was gonna find a comedy club, go into their basement, stand in front of their exposed brick wall, and start talking about my genitals to strangers, as people in my profession wanted to do. It was all I had to do, and then from then on, it would be off to Saturday Night Live. That was my big dream, but then my ambition started to grow, and then I figured, well, once I was done with Saturday Night Live, then I would go off and get my own sitcom. And then after that, I would start starring in movies. They would be my own original ideas, screenplays, ideas from my head. Maybe I would have a hit character on Saturday Night Live, and maybe that would become a movie. They've done that in the past a little bit. Blues Brothers, right? Maybe I could also just do a movie based on franchises that I loved as a kid. One of my favorite video games of all time is a game called Earthbound, and I would love to this day to get the rights to Earthbound and make a movie on that. They might not let me make it the way I want to, because of how Hollywood movies are made these days. They're kind of very focus group made, but that's still my dream. And there's other video games I like too, like Super Mario, Legend of Zelda. I would love to make movies on those games as well. How's that dream going for me? Who knows, maybe Steve Martin would notice me and ask me to have a part in one of his movies, or maybe Mike Myers would say, hey, we're reviving Austin Powers, I think you're great for this part, I would love for you to be in this. There's a lot of things that I would want to do, and so, honestly, I don't think I could get to all of it, really. I just have so many ideas that I just don't think I could realistically do everything. So how does one begin their dream of becoming a comedian? Well, in my case, I started doing stand-up, or at least I attempted to do it. So when I was looking at colleges, there happened to be one in Manhattan that I really liked, so I applied, got in, and the dorm that they stuck me in was actually literally a 3-minute walk to one of the biggest comedy clubs in New York City. So I was just like, well, that's a sign, jackpot. My path to success is like right there. So I started doing open mics, and open mics, they're this thing that comedians hate doing because they're just awful and dour, and you actually have to pay them to do it. Like, I had to pay $5 to go on stage every time, and those were the cheapest ones. Like, some of the worst ones, they would just make you buy 2 drinks, or like, and I was too young to legally drink, so it was just like, I guess I can get food, and I couldn't really afford to do that every day. I was broke in those days, broke college student, so I really could only do them once a week. You're supposed to do them every day, but again, couldn't afford it, and also I had schoolwork to do, so I was too busy to do them every day. So just once a week, I would try to keep at it. So wasn't the greatest way going about it, but I felt like I was at least doing something towards my goal. The smarter way to go after SNL specifically was to start doing improv. Now, the fortunate thing was, around this time, SNL started to recruit people from an improv theater in New York, the Upright Citizens Brigade. And this was a very big deal for me personally, because before that, if you wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, what you probably had to do was you had to move all the way to LA, hopefully get on a team at the Groundlings, or move to Chicago, get yourself a spot at Second City. So it was great having a place in New York that I could go to, hone my skills there, maybe get Lauren's attention, because I didn't have the balls to move to Chicago. I'm very bad at making friends, meeting new people, very introverted, and how was I going to identify with people in Chicago to make friends? I can't identify with somebody who guzzles Lipitor for breakfast. So my parents very nicely gave me the money to start taking classes at UCB, and I had a great time there. I loved it. I felt like I belonged somewhere finally. It filled me up with so much happiness that way. And my teachers all thought I was very good. They thought I had talent. And I probably could have gotten a Herald team and gotten discovered. Unfortunately, some things were happening with me at that time, and I couldn't really continue taking classes the way I wanted, which sucks because stand-up probably wasn't going to get me on Saturday Night Live. Most people that get on that show aren't stand-ups. There are some few that come from that world, like Chris Rock, I think maybe Tracy Morgan, although his story might be a little more complicated than that. Bill Hader, he, I guess, was doing stand-up in like the middle of nowhere, and somehow Megan Mullally saw him and thought he was great for SNL and called up the show. But that's just like a 1 in a million type deal. Like, I knew I couldn't get on the show that way. Like, if this show specifically was my dream, like, I couldn't do it that way. Like, it just wasn't gonna happen. That's a major reason why I never wanted to leave New York. I never wanted to go because of my dream. That, and I was from New York. I was from the surrounding suburbs, and I just didn't want to leave my home, and I didn't want to abandon my dream because my family, they wanted to move to Vegas. And then eventually they did sell our house, and they were going to move to Vegas, and they really were just like, come to Vegas with us, come, please. And I just was like, no, this is where I want to be, I want to be here. And they're like, come on though, it's Las Vegas, it's right next to LA, you can there's a big Hollywood scene out there that you can get discovered in, and in 9 years there's going to be high-speed rail, so you're going to be able to go to LA right away. Oh, that's how everybody wants to live their dream. 9 years from now. My family kept trying to get me to move with them, and I kept on saying no, I don't want to do it, because I loved that show. I wanted it more than anything. I wanted more than anything to be on that show. And I was stubborn too. I wouldn't go any other route. I know you're not supposed to be stupid, and if somebody from showbiz says, like, hey, I love you, I want to make a deal with you, but you can't be on Saturday Night Live, I would have been like, like, don't talk to me. Like, if I had an agent or a manager, and they were just like, hey, this network, they want to give you your own show, you're going to be the star, you can have your way all the time, 100% of the time, do whatever you want, I would have been like, that's amazing, but I want to be on Saturday Night Live, so no. And if he was just like, but why would you do that? You can have your way all the time, you can call the shots. It's just like, I realize that, but that's not my dream. I want to be on SNL. But you know, what if you write this major, poignant sketch about love and humanity that everybody loves and quotes for 25 years, like the cowbell sketch, and they don't put on air and instead put on a sketch called Bottled Farts? I'd have said, that's fucking stupid, but again, I'm willing to take the risk. I don't care. I want to be on Saturday Night Live. I believe in myself. I've seen who gets on the show. I feel like I can hold my own with them. I have confidence in myself that I can do it. I don't care. Get me that show. I can do this. That was what I told myself over and over. And I held on to my dream. I kept dreaming, held on tight. And then time passed, little time passed, more time passed, more and more. And then one day, I was thinking about it, and I just realized that I didn't want to be on Saturday Night Live anymore. And, you know, I still want to. Like, I'll always still want the thing that I wanted, but just somehow, it's just not my dream anymore. So how did it stop being my dream? Because it's a little bit like, wait, it was that big of a dream for you, and then all of a sudden you just stopped? That's a little weird. I agree. It's just, you know, it's been that way for a while now, so I kind of don't exactly remember. But the best way I could describe it, probably what happened is that the show and I, we were just kind of headed off in different directions. And, you know, in some ways, literally, because around the time that I started feeling this, I think a major nudge was that my family did twist my arm, and I did end up moving to Vegas with them. And with that came a certain level of, it's all over. So, you know, it just, you know, it was a very crushing blow. Now, I did realize that Vegas life wasn't really for me, and then eventually I was able to, after a few months, find a place in Brooklyn and move there. But, you know, by then a good chunk of damage had been done already. It wasn't just Saturday Night Live, because I've talked about this before, but like around this time, comedy was just starting to be seen as this evil thing. You know, a lot of my friends were just expressing these opinions that like jokes were just this bad thing, and you know, it made me feel bad about myself. And it was kind of just like, do I want the rest of my life to be like people just hating me? Because the whole point of me doing comedy was to get people to like me, so it's just like, you know, I don't have enough invested in that world, and maybe I should just try to find happiness elsewhere. I would be crushed doing that. It would be horrible, but maybe that was the wisest thing to do. But it wasn't just that, it was also the show itself. I did become a little bit less enamored with the show. This was around the time when Donald Trump was freshly elected for the first time, and what very likely happened was that the show was probably getting a lot of shit because they had him host, and you know how people are online, they were probably like, it's your fault he got elected, you were making him to be a popular, fun, lovable guy. And I think, you know, the people that worked on the show started to get this icky feeling inside, and they felt that they were responsible for helping him get elected, and now they were overcompensating by being obsessed with him. And when this is brought up, people on the left, they'll have this disingenuous argument. They'll be like, SNL has always been political. Not like this. Yes, they did always make fun of Clinton and both Bushes, other presidents like Reagan. I think Dan Aykroyd was the first guy to do Reagan. Oh no, maybe Chevy Chase did Gerald Ford before that. Anyway, the point is, yes, they've always made fun of presidents. Yes, but it was usually just during the opening sketch and maybe a few jokes during the news segment. After Trump, it became about 3 sketches per episode and most of Weekend Update. And, the thing that bothers me is that it was just like the writers just couldn't get them out of their heads. And they couldn't really even just relate to anything else in the larger world to write a sketch about if they wanted to. And that, I think, is a problem. Like, it's a problem because the show isn't just about that. Like, it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a variety show. Like, that's where the term comes from, I would assume. And, the vibes were different about it too. Like, in the George W. Bush era, you could tell that the writers didn't like him, but all of the humor aimed at him was still very appropriate feeling. Like, they knew not to just, make the country feel bad because of 9/11, and, they didn't go after, I felt they didn't go after, the easy blokes, easy blows, with their jokes, they would make fun of him for being dumb, but, even people who liked him knew that his persona was kind of, dumb and just in that rednecky, hillbilly sort of way, so, if you made fun of him for being dumb, it didn't feel like you were out of line, even though he's oh my god, that's our president. It still didn't feel out of line because it felt true, whereas a lot of this stuff that they're going after Trump for, rather than stuff that's just kind of just objectively true, is just more people can be some people are oh well, that's not true about him, and other people are yeah, that's totally about him, just keep going at it. So, they wanted you to laugh at Bush's flaws. With Trump, not only does the staff want to make it abundantly clear that they hate him, but it also feels a little bit like they think that every opinion they have about the guy is just fundamentally right, and if you don't also agree that a women's studies group should go and bomb Mar-a-Lago, then they hate you as well. Let me be clear. Let me be perfectly clear. I don't think that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. I think they should make fun of Trump. They have to make fun of Trump. There's a lot of material to work with there, too. Like how his hair looks like a mama bird abandoning its children in its nest. Or like how he's perfectly willing to tweet out his opinions on Taylor Swift at 3 a.m. while taking a dump. Or how he likes to stamp his name on everything, from buildings, to Bibles, to his daughter's lower back. Presidents and world leaders are the most powerful people on the planet, so it's if you can't make fun of them, who can you make fun of, I just don't think that that's what Saturday Night Live is supposed to be. At least not the whole show. I think, that's for The Daily Show and shows of that ilk. So that stuff does have its place, just it's not the type of comedy that I want to do. I see this attitude in show business just permeating pretty much all of entertainment, where it's you've been given a platform, so you have to use it the proper way, and it's their whole motivation is to shape the culture around us, and I don't want to do that. I'm here to entertain. I'm not here to lecture. So, I just want to do comedy that's just no, I'm getting verklempt, and, superstar, and, if you're gonna be living in a van down by the river, that type of thing. I just don't want, I don't want all of my art to be, about one person. I never want to be about, so obsessed with one single person that everything I do is about them. And I'm not above just focusing on one person, writing love poems about somebody. Even in a positive way, though, I don't want to be obsessed with one single person. it's weird to me. So if that's how I feel about being obsessed with somebody in a positive way, I definitely don't want everything I write to come from a place of negativity. That would be terrible. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm above doing a piece of comedy that lampoons somebody I detest. I'll do a piece about fitness influencers. Why not? It's just, I mostly want to do things that are happy and joyful. Like, to me, that's kind of the whole point. Like, I want people to be happy and having a good time, and I want to be responsible for that so that I can be happy with them. Like, that's the whole point of comedy to me. Uh, it's knowing that there's so many comedy writers out there that are taking a different approach than that, it just contributes to me feeling like I don't belong in the world of comedy. Like, if I was hired by Saturday Night Live, like, I could see how it would play out. So I think I would get hired, and then, everybody would be friendly toward me, because that's just how you are towards people you work with. And maybe we would end up being genuine friends, but I think just little by little, because, I'm a genuine person, I'm pretty honest, and I think, some people don't like that. Especially if you're used to people sugarcoating everything. That's not me. I'm not somebody who just says the right thing because it'll make them popular. And I think some people look at that like they're just terrible people when they're just not pretending to be something they're not, and they're willing to accept kind of the consequences of coming off kind of lame. So, I think I would have friends there, but I just think maybe after a while, and I just start saying more and more things that are in line with what I believe, that more people will just start chatting behind my back, and maybe just not including me in things, not inviting me out when they're hanging out, making me feel a little sad, and I could deal with that, but it's just, I think I would be friends with everybody for the most part for the entire time that I'm there. It's just I'm kind of worried about, like, 15 years down the line, when somebody's career's not going well, they just figure to get in the spotlight, they're just like, oh my god, Anthony Zuzula was such a monster. Once he waved hi to me, and he tried to make it like a regular wave, but I can tell he was putting his hand up like a Nazi salute, and I just feel so unsafe, and, I just don't want to feel betrayed like that. And part of me thinks, come on, you're being paranoid. But then I think about Shane Gillis and what happened to him, and I'm like, well, am I really? Because if you remember, like, he was hired by Saturday Night Live, and he was about to go on the show, and then some people, some little trolls did a little bit of digging, and then all of a sudden, he wasn't going to be on the show anymore. And he didn't even say anything that deplorable. He just made, like, a crappy little joke, and then just, they put a little bit of pressure on NBC, and he got gone. I think Lauren was, like, defending him, and the higher ups are the ones that, like, were like, no, he can't be on the show. And that sucks. Now, for Shane, it actually worked out in the end. Just, he's probably more famous than anybody on Saturday Night Live, except for maybe Kenan. So, can you really argue with that not working out for him? But still, I think it sucks, and it's not something that I want to go through. So it just felt like my dream of being a cast member on Saturday Night Live is part of a world that no longer exists. In a way, I've moved on, but that saying about time healing all wounds, I feel like that's a bit of an overreach. I don't really dwell on SNL that often, but there are little things that remind you, and SNL 50 is just a major case of that. Like I told you, I used to watch the show religiously, not live because, I wasn't allowed to stay up that late as a teenager, but the reruns after school, like I mentioned, I was always just like, it filled me up with this level of excitement, just the thought of Saturday Night Live automatically, just a show that used to make me happy automatically is now not that, and it's the opposite. It's something in this world that makes me feel bad about myself. But SNL 50 was such a monumental occasion that it would be silly for me to not embrace it just like a little bit. At first it was weird because it just seemed like they weren't going to do anything for it because I didn't hear anything about a 50th anniversary. And I was like, it's the 50th anniversary. Like, why aren't they doing anything? And then, like, 3 weeks before, they're just like, we're doing it. So, like, it was just, I guess it's really happening. So, and, stuff for it just after they announced it was just everywhere. There were just posters everywhere in the city. You were getting ads on your phone, that sort of thing. And it was unavoidable. And even in the subway, there was just like, as I was going to watch the show to my friend's apartment, like, in the subway, there's usually this little, like, I guess, ticker you would call it that, like, announces news, like, oh, the 4 trains delayed, that sort of thing. It never really, like, says anything beyond subway-related tidbits, details. And as I was going to my friend's apartment, there was, like, a little message that was just like, hey, this is Kenan Thompson. Don't forget to be safe or whatever, and also watch SNL 50. And it was just like, wow, like, the whole city is just like swept up in this. You feel the electricity all over the city. I got swept up in it. I ended up a couple days before roaming around 30 Rock while they were setting things up for the event. I went to the NBC store. That's a place for people who don't know. It's within 30 Rockefeller Plaza where you just go and you can buy merchandise from all the shows that they film there. I once got a mug for Late Night with Conan O'Brien there. It looked just like the mug that he uses on his show. It has since broke, because this is years ago, and since the show is no longer on the air, I cannot get another one, and I'm still pissed about it. Anyway, so I go to the NBC store, and I know that the show's gonna be all full of celebrities, and I'm not gonna be able to get in, but like I still went and was just like, oh, is there any way to get tickets, like standby tickets? The lady said no. I'm also pissed about that because there was a story about some guy sitting next to John Hamm or something that he like cozied up to. That could have been me. So yeah, kind of pissed at you, lady. But anyway, yeah. And then the day of the event, they were doing a red carpet, and normally I wouldn't have bothered because it would have been a madhouse, right? But you know, it was a very rainy day and it was cold for that time of year, so I was just like, well, it's cold and crappy out. Maybe there won't be too many people hoping to get validation from celebrities, hoping to acknowledge them, and maybe I can go. I'm kind of like them, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so I went, and it wasn't too bad, but like there still were a lot of people, and it was just like, yeah, why did I waste my time doing this?
Is that Conan? I think it's Bro! Is it? I feel like it's the girl who's coming. I can't.
So I stayed at the red carpet for a little bit, indulging myself in, I guess, pity or whatever you want to call it, before I went and headed off to my friend Jimmy's apartment so we can go watch the show together. And let me just tell you about my friend Jimmy really quick, because he's a great guy. He threw a birthday party for himself the night before, a milestone birthday party, in this bar that he ended up renting out. I think he rented it out because it was just for him. And so many people came. Uh, More people would have come, but again, it was like kind of snowing or raining, little wintry mix the night before. Anyway, just people showed up for him because everybody loves Jimmy. And so that happened the night before the SNL 50. Then SNL 50 was actually on his birthday, and he chose to spend his birthday watching it with me. And he didn't even let me buy him pizza. Like, we got pizza that he paid for on his birthday. That's how awesome Jimmy is. We've been friends for more than 20 years now, which probably makes us both feel ancient, but after I've described him, I think you can understand why. And Saturday Night Live, it's one of those things that we regularly talk about when we get together. We're both into nerdier things, so Marvel, movies in general, those are the topics of conversation that we normally dwell on. Uh, And I remember once when we were kids, he just said to me, "Man, you know every Saturday Night Live sketch ever," because I talked about it a lot. And, I was flattered at that comment, even though it wasn't true. Um, but I do know a lot about the show as a super fan who used to watch all the time. And there was this one sketch, this is when we were adults now, he was bringing it up. It's an obscure sketch called The Heat Is On, and as he was talking about it, like, I knew what he was talking about, and I came back at him with, "The H is O," because that's a line from the sketch. And so, we watched it together, had a great time, and I'm really glad that he did, because if he wasn't watching it with me, I probably would have just spent the night just sulking, being like, "I can't believe it's happening, SNL 50, and I'm not there." And, you know, I don't think he knew that I was going to be sad watching this anniversary special. Like, it's not like he was just, like, helping me out through a rough patch. It's not like he saw a friend and that was his motivation. I think he just wanted to hang out with me. But I really appreciate it anyway. And, whether he knew that or didn't know that, I appreciate his companionship. If you end up watching this, Jimmy, just thanks, man. I love you, buddy. You're a great friend, and I'm glad we've been friends since high school. I was this close to spending the whole night feeling sorry for myself because, as arrogant as it might sound, I really feel like I was supposed to be in that room. Um, like deep down, like I know I could have done it. Like, you know what I mean by it. Like I could have done it. Like I could have lived my dream. Just I was pretty good at comedy. Like, okay, more than pretty good. Like I was good. Trying not to sound arrogant, but just I believed in myself. Comedy. It's not like being an actor or actress where like you can't necessarily tell whether you're good at acting or not, because people will come up to you afterwards and they'll, even if you give a crappy performance, they'll indulge you anyway. Like if you have friends in the audience, they'll be like, "Oh wow, you were so good, you were just like Meryl Streep if she accepted parts that were beneath her," that sort of thing. Or, same thing if you're a singer. Like, if you're a singer and you're a shitty singer, just, you'll have people being like, "Oh, you were so great. Just, I was only sticking my fingers in my ears because I wanted to redirect the sound to hear it better." You know, whereas there's other things like, say, fishing. If you're good at fishing, you go out with the goal of catching a fish. So you go out, and if you come back with a fish, it's just like, hey, that's not bad, right? Comedy is like that. You can tell pretty easily if you're good at it. You want to make people laugh, they want to laugh, you make them laugh. Like I alluded to before, I didn't always have the confidence to become a comedian. That's something I gained later, particularly in a class that I had in high school. So before that, I had done like a little 5-minute stand-up set. My friends had a garage show where their bands played, and I impromptu was just like, "Hey, can I just do some comedy?" Like, just spur of the moment, because like I was like, I want to do this, so maybe I should. So off the top of my head, I did something, and the 10 kids in the whole garage that were close enough to hear me laughed, so they liked it. And then later I took this class in high school, this class where we would regularly give speeches, and one of the kids in the class said, "Oh, I heard him do stand-up comedy once, he's very good," and he said that in front of the whole class, and like when he said that, I was just like, "What are you doing?" like in my head, because like I wasn't ready to be that, like I was only that funny guy for my friends, and now he was just kind of like thrusting me in this light. And I don't know why I was nervous about that. Maybe just because, growing up in the 90s, a lot of the imagery was like adults were very like firm and stiff, and you weren't supposed to joke around like that. So I guess maybe in school I got it in my head that you weren't supposed to be funny. But yeah, so I remember the first speech that we were going to do in class. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I said that aloud to my teacher, and she was just like, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm sure it'll be very funny. And when she said that, like, a little spark clicked within me, like, wait, I could be funny? Like, it never occurred to me that I could be funny. I just thought schoolwork was to be smart and nothing else. So, she said that, and, my whole view kind of changed, and, I made my first speech, and it wasn't really going well, and then, like, I came to one line, and it got a laugh from everybody, and, from then on, I felt like, oh, I can be this funny person in front of everybody. People are willing to accept me as that. Because before I was just this nerd that, like, it felt like nobody liked, and I just, I wasn't very popular. I just had a few friends, but never really hung out with them. And then senior year, I just got very popular because of that class. People were, enjoying me. It felt like I was accepted. Um, yeah. Uh, kids that used to bully me, pour ice cream on my Jesus Loves Me t-shirt. That didn't happen, just kidding. But those kids, they wanted to be my friend. So, I got so popular, or at least, like, me giving speeches did, that, like, I remember once my teacher legitimately used me as a threat. Like, the class was acting rowdy, and she was just like, guys, you better calm down, because if you don't calm down, Anthony Zuzula will not get to give his speech. Like, and when you hear something like that, it's just like, it definitely fills you up with pride, and you feel like you can accomplish anything. And it wasn't just comedy, or it wasn't just non-comedy people, because comedy people, they loved me too. When I took classes at Upright Citizens Brigade, I was very good. I had teachers. I was the only one in my classes that more than once, like, or at least twice, I've had every teacher I had burst out in laughter because of something I said. And I was probably the only person that could say that. So, I mention all this to say, like, I'm not somebody that was deluding myself into saying that I had talent. Like, me having a future in comedy was in the realm of plausibility. It just didn't work out. So, I never really invested in a backup plan for my life because I had felt unstoppable. After a while, you start to see the world differently, and it comes out in these little things, like I told you about that comedy club that was a 3-minute walk from my dorm that made me feel like, oh yes, this is great, this is a sign. I had a mirror image, evil twin, I guess, version of that when that place Second City from Chicago opened up a branch in New York, right around the corner from my apartment, after I had moved out from that apartment. And it just felt like, damn, I could have been there every day working on stuff, and maybe that would have reignited my passion for Saturday Night Live and, all this other stuff, and I wouldn't feel hopeless. But instead it just felt like, heh, you're not gonna be able to do anything. And, I know we assign meaning to stuff as human beings, both positively and negatively. In one case I was just like, oh, this means I'm gonna do great, and the other is just like, oh no, it feels hopeless. And, I know not to take that too seriously because we're assigning that meaning, but there is still that human element where you can't help but view things that way. And, it's discouraging. And, when I was walking around 30 Rock before Saturday Night Live, that was one of those moments, because I came across this mural, and it had just so many cast members and characters on it, and I looked up at the mural, and there were all these faces, and my own face, it wasn't one of them, and, it felt pretty bad. That was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for my dream, And there had been other little things like that accumulating over the years, such as when Don Pardo had passed away, and I remember thinking, man, I'm never gonna hear him say my name. Although there actually was a Saturday Night Live sketch where Lauren trotted out a Don Pardo robot, and he was just like, now Don Pardo can be the voice of the show forever. And with the advent of AI, I guess that's possible now. So I guess Saturday Night Live predicted the future. Suck it, Simpsons. Anyway, it was a huge blow. A little piece of my heart felt like it broke off. And not that that's the most major thing in the world. It's just, when you picture your dream, you don't half-ass it like some motel hooker. You picture the perfection of it. The problem with that is when you do that, it's kind of like clenching your fist too tightly. Whatever is in your hand is just gonna slide on through. The show was the thing that slipped through my grip. But it was more than the show, because I think with all of our dreams, it's not really the dream that we're pursuing, it's the feeling that we think the dream will provide us with. I was listening to an audio clip, I think it was of a podcast, where Tim Meadows was being interviewed, and in his time he had a very long run for a cast member on SNL. But anyway, he was talking about a memory he had of Chris Farley, because both of them had started off at Second City in Chicago, and then later they auditioned for Saturday Night Live and they got the show. So they had camaraderie between them, and I think it was maybe before a show, probably after dress rehearsal before they went live, and Tim and Chris, they ended up in an elevator together at 30 Rock, and Chris Farley turns to Tim Meadows and he goes, "Can you believe it, Timmy? We made it." And, I could feel his memory when he retold that story, and I think that's the thing that I've always been chasing. That's the feeling that I wanted. And, I didn't want to just be a cast member. I basically wanted to be Will Ferrell. Like, I wanted to be the best cast member on a very stacked cast that was highly respected. And I wanted to be that guy that everybody was just like, wow, that guy's awesome. And I also wanted to just have the other cast members around me just take inspiration from me and be like, oh, you guys, come on, let's all be the best that we can be and put on the best show we can, and just let's raise each other up and have an amazing time and go through this bond together. Because I wanted to be part of the reason I wanted to be part of that show was, instead of having my own show where I get to call the shots, it's just like, it's that feeling that it gives me. There's nothing else like it. I wanted to be part of that fraternity and that history of the show and have this sense of a bond with just a select few people that felt like kind of exclusive, but still just with them. And, like, I looked up at that mural and I wanted to feel like I wanted to belong with these legends. And, I looked up and my face was nowhere to be found. And instead of happiness and pride, I just felt regrets of the choices I made and shame in myself. Don't get me wrong, if Lauren somehow saw something that I did and called me up and was just like, I saw you and I think you'd be a really good fit for the show, yeah, because, I kind of am. I'm a funny guy who doesn't give a shit about politics, and he was looking for somebody like that at least 5 years ago. I don't know if they have anybody like that, but anyway, if he contacted me, I wouldn't be like, no, that's not my dream anymore. I'd be like, yes, and I'd go in and give him an audition. Maybe create a character called Hipster Gregory, who's obsessed with pumpkin spice or some shit like that. I don't know. It's just that I don't see that really as a path anymore. It's, very foggy, and, it feels like a door has been closed to me. For some people, it's in their nature to be a dreamer, and they'll keep dreaming even after the possibility of winning is not there anymore. I think that I'm probably one of those people, but I do like to think that I'm still grounded enough in reality to make wise choices. Um, Sometimes your ship has sailed. Take my dad, for example. My dad, he's one of the most natural athletes you're ever going to meet. My family, we did these citywide mud races together, and my dad's not faster than me because I'm pretty fast, but he finished in a time that was better than most of the 20-year-olds that were competing. That's pretty impressive, don't you think? Uh, of course, he didn't pass any of that athletic skill on to me. Uh, I was the kind of kid that would just flinch when footballs were chucked at me. I ducked and covered like that turtle in those nuclear bomb cartoons. Dad, of course, was never like that. He was an exceptional football player. He was quarterback in his high school varsity football team. Some of you might be old enough to remember a show called Married with Children. Remember Al Bundy on that show? There were lots of episodes of that show that involved Al bringing up how he was quarterback at Polk High, and he scored 4 touchdowns in one single game. That was his big amazing feat, his claim to fame, his glory days where he scored 4 touchdowns in one game. Well, in real life, my dad scored like 6 or 7. I don't remember exactly which. And I also don't remember if his team went undefeated or maybe they just lost one game or something like that. But, the point is he was very good. There is this one story I recall. So, Dad had built up a reputation, and there was one evening where my mother's high school was having its homecoming pep rally. This is before they met, and the school had a big bonfire, and they trot out this dummy, and it's dressed up in my father's football jersey with his number on it, and kids at the school, they shout, "This is what we're going to do to the Panthers quarterback." And they took the dummy and they chucked it into the fire and burned it. He was that big of a threat. Whether or not the kids pulled out sharp sticks and started roasting marshmallows over the carcass of Pleasantville Panthers number 15 afterwards, I don't know. But it speaks to how much of a threat he was on the gridiron, and entire schools could see it. Kind of a romantic story between my mom and dad when you think about it. My mom, she started off shouting from the bleachers for somebody to rip my dad's head off. Then one day she meets that handsome stranger and she realizes that she can do so much more damage sucking a soul away over the course of a marriage. Knowing this, if I were to tell you that I wasn't into sports, you could probably understand why my dad would be a little disappointed in me, because sports were basically his life, the way that comedy was basically mine. It was his dream to play in the NFL someday. And was he talented enough to play football professionally? The results seem to indicate so, but who knows? He was talented enough to get himself a full scholarship to college, could have gotten an education in any discipline he wanted, totally for free, except maybe for the cost of a few books. My grandfather didn't like that, though. He didn't think that football was something my dad should be pursuing at all, so he discouraged my dad. Not only from just playing football, but from going to college at all. And this is after he would have gotten a completely free ride and my grandfather wouldn't have had to pay a cent towards his education. It's a little weird to me. I don't know what his reasons were. But I think that's why Pop used to love me a little extra, because I think maybe one day he just realized that he did some damage towards his relationship with his son because of that. And, I think he probably saw me as a second chance. And I also think it's the reason why my dad just never told me not to do comedy. If I'm being honest, I don't think he was completely encouraging. Like, some things he did encourage me, other things he did that weren't so encouraging. But to his credit, he never said, "No, don't do this." And he always said, "I want you to do your comedy." Like, even after, when there were times when I wasn't really doing anything creative, he was just like, "Why don't you do your comedy?" So, you gotta take the good with the bad. Why am I bringing up my dad? Because if my dad all of a sudden decided that he wanted to live the dream that he never got to live tomorrow, do you think that they would let him? Do you think that these billion-dollar franchises would hinge everything on him and put him on the field with several 400-pound linebackers? No, they wouldn't. So to all those people who would go, "Oh, you're never too old to live your dream," yeah, you are. Sucks, but it's true. It's too late for him, just like it might be too late for me. Now, the good part is that for him, it seems like it worked out. He met my mom later, like I mentioned. They fell in love, had a family, and he seems very happy and content in general. My dad, people love my dad. I'm very likable. People like me, but they want to be my dad. That's how I always saw it. And so he gets fulfillment from, the family and people around him. He's still fulfilled within his life. And, he's not like Al Bundy or Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. I don't see a hint of that. Just, I could have been something like in his personality. And that's very different for me. I'm very ruled by the shame and all the things that I didn't do and the mistakes I made. And the smart thing to do would be to try to look to him and just not, figure out how he's able to just not let that stuff get him down like it does me. Like me, he was also robbed of his dream, but he never let it get him down, and he was able to be content having a wife and a daughter and a son who airs out his private business over the internet. And I have to similarly find fulfillment in another area of my life, just like he did. I still do creative things. Just like I said, I get so many ideas that I can't realistically do them all. So maybe, not being on Saturday Night Live is just helping me do something that would be more fulfilling in the end. Just like how George Lucas could never make that Flash Gordon movie he wanted, and he ended up creating Star Wars. Shigeru Miyamoto, he wanted to make a Popeye video game, didn't get the license, and instead made Donkey Kong, and that's what led to Super Mario. So, I don't know, maybe in my wildest dreams something like that will happen for me, because I didn't get the dream that I wanted. Who knows? So, I guess the message is, you're never too old to change your dream and find something else in life that's worth living for. I gotta remember that myself. And at the end of these videos, I usually like to give you some homework and tell you what to do. I'm kind of at a loss here because, I don't know too much what to tell you because, like I said, I'm full of regrets about things I didn't do. I guess maybe just, if you are somebody with dreams, just, there's a reason they say don't put all your eggs in one basket. And, it doesn't matter how great you are. If somebody's hell-bent on telling you no, like, that's an obstacle that you can't surpass sometimes. And that's just one example of an obstacle that you might not be able to pass despite your skill. So just, prepare to have a backup and have it be something that you love. Regrets and shames, they're no fun. And a lot of the confidence that I had, I've lost some of it. I can still find it sometimes. A friend, he asked me to work on a project recently, and, I got it back like that when I was working on it. But, it's not always there. Like, if you watch my first video, I wasn't comfortable in front of a webcam, and I'm still not, as evidence of me getting tongue-tied and held up is there, I'm still not great at it. So, it's still just something about this webcam that just makes me not comfortable. It makes me very self-aware, self-conscious, and, as long as I can shed, my vision of me in my head, see, I'm fucking up right now. As long as I can shed, not pay attention to myself, I'm in the clear. I got my mojo back, but just something about this webcam, it doesn't allow me to do that. So, yeah. So just be aware that you might end up with regrets someday, and the way to counteract that is, looking for other sources of happiness. And, also, what I'd like you to do maybe is just, find somebody in your life to encourage. It's probably a lot easier if it's somebody close to you, but maybe it could be a complete stranger that you could be like, hey, what are your hopes and dreams? And maybe they'll tell you, and maybe you can, be like, hey, I'll go to your band's show, or, I know somebody in publishing, maybe I can, set something up with them and, show them your writing. Even if you don't have those resources and skills to help them, just sometimes knowing that somebody believes in you would go a long way. I know if I had somebody that I felt believed in me a little more than what I had, I feel like that was a missing ingredient that, I could have helped me overcome those obstacles. So yeah, just try to encourage somebody. Maybe they'll encourage you back. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a personal one, like all the ones are on this channel, but probably a little extra today. And yeah, just do all the things. Respectful comment down below towards me and your other commenters. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and just be nice to each other, because that's a lot better than doom. What's that, buddy? You don't want me to live my dream because you want me to stay home and take care of you all the time? Well, that's not very nice.